And let me start with the welcoming my Director General, Sri Arun Kumar Jha. I welcome you, sir, for gracing this webinar and being a participant in this. And I hope that we gain through the experience that the Do School will share with us. I like to introduce NPC to the Do School. So just for the orientation, I'll just give you a brief introduction about NPC. We are basically a pan-India based autonomous body that was established in 1958 with the mandate to drive productivity across the country. So in the initial phases, we were to spearhead the consciousness for socio-economic development of the country through promotion and dissemination of research, training activities, consultancy in various fields. So we are also a founding member of Tokyo-based Asian Productivity Organization, and that that has been basically spearheading the productivity movement across Southeast Asia. We have a strength of around 127 consultants that are experts in different domains like energy efficiency, industrial engineering, energy, agriculture, business, economic services, human resource, various fields. And we basically have a close association with industry, ministries, and we have done a bunch of uh, consultancy assignments with the industry and the ministry also. Our organization is headed by the uh, secretary that is the chairman of our organization, and under which our director general heads and leads the organization. So I'll introduce the Do School and how we basically arranged this webinar with them. Back in the day, I think 2-3 weeks back, Brett just mailed me and just casually inquired about any kind of role associations we can have with them. So we uh, we basically are a member of APO, and APO holds different training programs, different Asian locations, Asian country locations. So we uh, we basically do we, we nominate people to attend these programs, and we also do training programs ourselves. So we think that there is an opportunity that we can collaborate on this. Uh, like, I'll introduce Brett to you. He is a manager of the founders office at the Do School. He works very closely with the Do School's management team, and he has a master's in public policy from Hertie School of Governance in Berlin. And there he focused on management, organization, and public sector innovation. He has a thesis mapped on the future of public sector innovation by conducting a quality study. So he is basically an expert in public service. So we thought that it is a very good opportunity for us to learn from the experts. Now over to you, Brett.
Well, thank you, Mayank, for the very kind introduction, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We're honored and excited to have the opportunity to get to introduce ourselves and our work a bit. As Mayank said, I work with our sort of public sector partners, and I'm actually a public servant by training. I spent over 5 years working in the U.S. Senate, both in Washington, D.C., and in my home state. and then moved to Berlin to do my master's, and I fell in love with the city and that state ever since, and have been with the Do School. So it's really a pleasure, and as a fellow former public servant, I'm grateful for all of the hard work I know you're doing to make India and the world a better place. As Mayank mentioned, I was connected through to MPC through APO and the Development Academy of the Philippines, with whom we've done a program with in the past few months around Industry 4.0. So I just wanted to introduce myself, and Mayank and I had a great conversation and said, there's so much shift to work in the digital sector now. It would be great to do something for public servants. So here we are. But with that being said, I think I'll just sort of leave it there, and I'm happy to introduce my colleague, Ruben Steinfeld, who is one of the co-founders of the Do School and our director of organizational transformation. Ruben will be guiding you through the presentation, and I think I'll leave it there and let him introduce himself and get started. So thank you all, and looking forward.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot for the kind intro, Brett. Sorry if I was looking a little bit distracted. I tried to dial in on a second device so that later, if there's any questions, I can also see your faces. So sorry when I looked a little distracted, but I've actually managed it now. Just briefly about myself, I've, as Brett has mentioned, I'm part of the founding team of the Do School. From the very beginning, had a focus on creating the methodologies and engagements that we've used with our partners throughout the years to help them transform successfully. It's been a huge pleasure so far doing that. My background is in international relations and political science. So I'm not quite in public service, but not too far away. I spent some time doing that in Israel, but also in London at the London School of Economics. And I've been for a long time now married to a civil servant in the British government. So I feel I have a little bit of affinity by association with the field of public service. But maybe that's enough for today to make sure that we move on in the time that we have together. As you know, briefly, I'll try and say a few words about the Do School so that you have a little bit of context of who we are and what we're all about, and then dive into a short best practice sharing around remote leadership and digital collaboration. Before looking forward to your questions towards Brett and myself, and hopefully making this as interactive as it can be. I'll still rely on Brett and Mayank for any pointers if the connection is bad or if you can't hear well. Make sure to flag it. Otherwise, I will set us off and get us started with the content. Just starting a little bit from a big picture, before we talk about what the Do School is, I think for us, we always start with the why. The changes that we'll see coming to our world, and for the way that we will need to take action and react to them. And this is even before considering such black swan events such as COVID-19, which we're all facing globally right now. But that should also not distract us from the other changes that are continuously just as relevant. So whether we talk about climate change, whether we talk about how the nature of work will change globally in different ways, perhaps, but it'll affect every country around the globe, or the effects of urbanization and what that means for shifts in population, for shifts in social structure. So these are huge topics that we all face. And when we say we all face them, we believe that means governments have to face them, but also large organizations, corporations have to face them. and individual entrepreneurs have to face them. And only if we successfully empower and integrate all those different groups will we be ready and able to face those changes together. And this is why, since its inception, the Do School is one of the few organizations that, as a matter of principle, works across all those target groups. So we have a long history of working with some of the biggest global companies, whether it's consumer goods like Unilever, whether it's industry like Covestro or Daimler, or whether it's fashion and retail like H&M, and working with them on transforming their own organizations to become more innovative, to be more successful as leaders, but also to be more sustainable. But we've also done that very same kind of work with governments and intragovernmental organizations around the globe. So from the Swedish government, currently working with the Canadian government, we've worked with the German government in the past, now have a fantastic project together with UN Women, but have worked together as well with the UN Environment, have worked together with the UN Global Compact, both on international and local levels. And as a matter of fact, have worked together with local governments as well. For instance, the city of New York under Mayor Bloomberg, or currently, for example, the Hong Kong government. So a pillar in working together with large corporations, an important pillar in working together with the public sector, but also a strong pillar and a huge global community of entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs that fuel the work that we do with the large corporations, including over the past 10 years, many of them from India who've joined our programs in Berlin and other places all around the world to get support for their startups and ideas and ventures. So in short, we believe in a purposeful economy. We want to drive that purposeful economy. And we do that by providing consulting and training services specifically around topics of transformation and leadership. For government specifically, that means we work together to help them adapt to disruption and change in a faster and faster changing world, working with the public servants to empower them with new skills and mindsets, and with our experience in open, facilitated innovation processes, are able to provide very new and exciting ways to innovate and create impact together with citizens directly. We do all of this work around what we call the 6 building blocks of transformation. So those are 6 building blocks that over the past 10 years of our practice and research have emerged as the key components that every organization, whether it's a small startup, whether it's a government, whether it's a large corporate organization, need to address and continuously work on to be successful in adapting to change and creating the impact they want to create. It starts for us with purpose, which is also why I started with our why. It continues with building and developing new skills and mindsets continuously. We have a strong emphasis on co-creation, so building new solutions together with all stakeholders in facilitated processes. We believe one way to take purpose and make it actionable with employees of an organization, whether it's a public organization or a private organization, is what we call building movement. So finding the pain points, the topics that unite all members of a large organization and giving them the opportunity to drive individual actions around those topics. Lastly, we believe in becoming a networked organization. So something that I think us coming together here is a great starting point. So reaching out beyond the traditional boundaries of organizations. And lastly, delivering and measuring social impact. So this is all a very quick whistle-stop tour. There's a lot to say on each one of those 6 building blocks, why we think they're important and how in detail we work with our partners on achieving them. But I leave it here for now as a little taster or teaser, almost more of what we do, why we do it, and what our key ingredients are, and move us on to the topic that we want to do a short best practice sharing on today. Now, I'm sure all of you had to adapt and change your daily rhythms over the last weeks quite drastically. All our partners had. We have an office and a team in Hong Kong, and many of our partner organizations sit there. So we've been working with that kind of setup already for quite a while, since they were very early to shut down and go into isolation already. But for all of us, still, it's a new situation. But if we look at some of the keywords in the title, leadership and collaboration, those are, of course, not new topics, right? So while there are new aspects on how to successfully lead and collaborate in today's circumstances, they go back to fundamental principles of your organizations and may expose both some strengths and some weaknesses. Nevertheless, we've tried to sort of come and bring you today 3 high-level areas that we want to share with you, that we suggest you take a look at to be more successful in terms of online collaboration. The first one that I briefly want to talk to you about is creating an inspiring online space. So basically what we want you to do is think about your online environment with the same kind of care and attention to detail that you would bring to physical environments where you want people to come together to successfully create and collaborate. And very specifically, that means you're thinking about the tools, the technical tools, but you should also think about the soft elements. So very simply, we've called it taking the awkward out of online. So how do you get people to a place where they feel comfortable sharing and trying new things online by modeling that kind of behavior? So be sure that you create an environment where people feel comfortable sharing, where people feel comfortable coming up with ideas, even if it's in an online space. And the second bit that we want to share here under creating the digital space is a note that creating visible manifestations of the work that you've created. So if you think about an in-person collaborative meeting, it usually means people writing things on a whiteboard or on a flip chart, putting post-its across walls, maybe even if you're doing some rapid prototyping, putting a physical model together of something. But in all that, you have the act of creating something physical together. So that means after an hour meeting or even after a day of workshop, there are physical things there that you created that weren't there before. And this is part of both aligning what you've created together, but it's also part of what gives participants a sense of achievement. It's important to replicate that in the digital space as well. This can range from simply having an online whiteboard during a meeting and making use of it. They're built into most softwares today, but it can go all the way to hiring, for example, a live illustrator. So in a workshop, for instance, that we ran 2 weeks ago for a large logistics company that brought together, I think it was around 60 people from 3 different time zones. For parts of the sessions that we ran online, we had a live illustrator dialed into the conversation, and every hour or so she would share the live illustrations that she had created in the meantime that would capture the conversations that are going on. So this is just 2 examples on 2 different ends of the spectrum of how you can create physical manifestations of the output that you create as part of the digital space that you create. The second big point that I would like to bring in is to think about what is your remote culture. And there, we really come back to the point that whatever you do online is an extension of what you as an organization already did before offline, so to speak. So where you are, what your strengths and your weaknesses were, will be manifest also in terms of your online culture. You will probably want to adapt and change a few things when you look at developing a strong remote culture. So what I want to give you today as part of this sort of whistle stop tour is 4 levers that you can think about when you want to create cultural change, and then give examples of how that can look like when we're talking about digital culture. So a model that we work with in general in terms of cultural transformation with a lot of our partners is a model that looks at want, can, should, and must in terms of transformation, looking at your organization. So what does that mean? When we talk about want, we mean what do people intrinsically want? If you ask them to change something, to behave in a new way, to create a new culture, what are the things where you can really instill intrinsic motivation? And the way to do that is, on the one hand, through our building block of purpose, right? So making clear people understand the why. And this, of course, happens through leadership and communication. Yeah? But being motivated is only going to get you so far. You then have to look at can, which are the skills, the abilities, the mindsets that your employees, your teams have. And there, in some ways, the answer of how you can work on that, how you can move that lever is the easiest, because you have to look at training opportunities. So can people actually use the tech tools that you want them to use? This is sort of like more on the hard skill side. But then a little trickier is, how are you doing on the soft skills, on the mindsets? So do you have to invest more during especially remote working times into thinking about communication skills, collaboration skills, in order to make sure people collaborate together in the best way? But the way to address this is through training, through workshops, through exercises. When you have people motivated and you have people able, the next thing to look at is, what in the should category, what is it that your organization in its culture values? So what are the kind of behaviors, the kind of actions that get recognition? And recognition can be in a lot of ways. So it can be, what is the kind of work that gets praised by a superior during a team meeting? What is the kind of action that, for instance, gets remunerated through a bonus? What are the kind of things for which there are awards within an organization? So all these sorts of implicit and explicit ways in which certain behaviors, actions, attitudes are rewarded and recognized are things that you need to examine when you're trying to build a digital culture. So do you want people to be more innovative in terms of the kind of tools that they use? Then the question is, do people who bring new tools into the organization or who try something new, does that get recognized? Does that get mentioned? Is that sort of rewarded in some sort of way? And lastly, and this is in some extent always the trickiest one, you have the category of must. So those are the hard and fast rules and processes of the organization, right? So, and this is again something that can very easily hamper or accelerate digital culture change. A wonderful example here are, for instance, your IT regulations. You can have extremely tight regulations, and there may be some good reasons for that, of course, but that will make it very hard to be innovative, to try new things, to experiment. So looking at your rules and processes and procedures and really examining them, where do they hinder and where do they support the kind of culture that you're trying to create in terms of digital collaboration, and finding the right balance between needs for efficiency and security and the kind of culture that you would like to create. So this is hopefully a helpful tool that if you're looking at where do we need to move from where we are today to where we would like to be in terms of our culture, to basically take those 4 lenses and look very concretely at where do we have to look at the motivation of our teams, where do we have to look at the abilities, where do we have to look at what we recognize and reward as an organization, and where do we really have to look at the rule book and examine where maybe changes are needed there. With that, I would come to the last point that I would like to bring in here, namely mindsets for virtual co-creation, innovation, and entrepreneurial spirit. And let me introduce the terminology for another minute here. Why do we talk about mindsets at the Do School? The reason that you're hopefully all seeing an image of a few hats here is because that's how we look at mindsets. Yeah? So mindsets doesn't describe anybody as a person, but it's a way of putting on a certain frame, a certain perspective for a certain purpose. Just the way that I would use a baseball cap for a different reason that I would wear a hard hat, to a different reason that I would use, let's say, a fancy hat for going to the opera, right? They are changeable, they aren't fixed, but they help you achieve a certain purpose or put you in a certain framework of thinking. And this is something that we at the Do School have spent a lot of time working on with our partners, with experts, with lots of research. And we have, for us, defined a set of mindsets that we found very helpful in our practice. In fact, we found 12 different mindsets that we find helpful when trying to be both innovative and effective in terms of implementation. Let me give you two examples from here for today. So one mindset, for instance, that really is important to us is what we call the child's mindset. And the child's mindset, we think, is really crucial when you're trying to create an innovative solution at the beginning of the process. It's the mindset where you ask why. You ask lots and lots of questions, and no question is too stupid. It's the mindset where we very decidedly don't already jump to the conclusion, don't think we know the answer, but are really open to learning. It's also the mindset where you can brainstorm, you can come up with lots and lots and lots of ideas. On the other hand, a mindset that we, especially in times like these, think is super crucial is what we call the urgency mindset. And the urgency mindset is a mindset that helps you make decisions and commit to action, even though not everything may be perfect yet. And you don't maybe have all the information that you were hoping for. But when the balance between holding out longer for more information and the opportunity cost of not starting to take action, of not starting to implement, becomes too high, the urgency mindset is the mindset that helps you make decisions. And I hope that just these two examples illustrate a little bit that the mindsets that we need in today's world are A, different, and B, even at times contradictory to each other. That means we need to very decidedly sometimes create a space where all questions are okay and any ideas are okay. And there's another mindset where we now really need to come to a decision. And when we come together physically, it's easier just by reading the mood of the room to know what's needed right now and to get into sync on what kind of mindset we want to be together in as a group. When we're collaborating online, we have to make things much more explicit than we would otherwise do. So our key recommendation here is whether you take our 12 mindsets or whether you create your own mindsets, but is to introduce the concept of mindset to your team and create a mindset inventory. So create a set of words that describe the different mindsets that you and your team need to be in during different phases of a process, of decision making, of taking action, of negotiating, whatever is relevant in your context. And then use these mindsets to align on what you want to achieve. And if we go deeper into the mindset work in our practice, what we then always look at is not just creating the inventory and the words to describe it, but then go deeper and look into what kind of actions and behaviors, tools, exercises will help you and your team get into a certain mindset and be effective in that mindset. And again, anyways, when you're trying to be innovative and get to implementation, which at the end, it's in our name, Do School is what we're all about, being able to switch mindsets is absolutely crucial. It's important to have that inventory if you're working together as a team. But now, even more than ever, while working remotely, while not being able to read facial and body language the way we normally do, by not spending as much time in sort of chance encounters in the office, at the water cooler, knowing just what's going on left or right, over communicating and having a set framework with which to set expectations is absolutely crucial. And this is why we believe mindsets is going to be a key part in driving efficiency in terms of digital collaboration. I'll end here with a short summary. So for us, if there's a few takeaways, then think about how do you set the scene for your online collaboration. Think about the software you use, but also think about how do you set the mood, the atmosphere, how do you make people comfortable in a situation that for us as humans is just a little less normal than we'd like it to be. Always think about in every meeting, but especially if you're really trying to collaborate online, so create something together, make the output visible, both as you go along and at the end. So have something created by the end of your collaboration that everybody can see and that everybody's been part of. In terms of the bigger picture of how you can drive culture change, look at those 4 aspects of what do people want, what can they do, what is the should, the sort of the normative culture that you can create in your organization, and what's the rule book, what's the must. And lastly, determine what are the mindsets that are relevant for you in your organization and practice switching those different mindsets consciously together in your team. Bringing it all a little bit to a close and just bringing together why we're super excited to have that opportunity to both share a little bit from our practice with you guys today and then now engage in a few questions. We genuinely believe that working together with the public sector and especially public servants is absolutely crucial for us if we want to achieve what we've set out to do, which is to drive the idea of a purposeful economy. You have a tremendously important role to play. I think, again, also in the current crisis, the role of government is more visible than it's been, I think, in a long time in the public debate. I think there's a huge and tremendous chance in that. To be very frank, also, at least speaking for Europe, where I have a bit more knowledge about it, the role of government and the public sector here in the next few years is going to grow, both in terms of its economic importance, but also in terms of the role they will play with the unemployment that will likely be to see, with digitalization, with perhaps retraining of people. So I think there's a very seismic shift that at least we can starting to see happen here in Europe. And I'm sure in India, the same will be true. So I think this is an incredibly opportune moment to have this conversation. And now I'll hand back to Brad, but I think we're looking forward to your thoughts and questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Ruben. Really appreciate it. Now we have time to take some questions. If anything sort of stuck out from what Ruben presented, or something more about what we do in a larger picture or whom we've worked with, you can either write the questions in the chat or the Q&A function, or I suppose I don't see any questions at the moment. I don't know, Mayank, if there's something I'm not seeing. But otherwise, I suppose just ask a question.
Yeah. To start with, let me ask you a question, Ruben.
Please.
You said that there are different mindset, and you very elaborately explained that there are different phases of team structure formation, and there are different mindset that basically aligns different team members to focus on a thing. So team members can have different mindsets, and then they can think creatively. Like a member can have a child's mindset, other can have a urgency mindset, and then they can collaborate, align themselves to come out with a solution kind of to the problem.
I think that's a brilliant question. And I think it gets to the heart of why we think mindsets are so important, especially creating a mindset inventory within your team. Because I think that the situation that you described is absolutely telling. Imagine you and I, we come together to a meeting, and you really just, you're really early in a process and you just want to sit down with me and brainstorm, right? You haven't had much time to think about it and you just really want to come in, be open, be creative, and brainstorm ideas. And I come in with, for instance, what we call the scientist's mindset. And the scientist mindset for us is the mindset that tries to falsify every theory, that tries to look at where could this go wrong? Why might this not work? How could I prove this is not a good idea? And you want to brainstorm with me, and I come in with that mindset because, and this is a true case, because this is a little bit my natural tendency. So I tend to, if you pitch me an idea, I'm immediately like, how can I find a flaw in it? Not because I want to be mean, because this is how my mind works. If we can talk about the mindsets, then I can make an effort for the meeting to also go into the child's mindset and help you just brainstorm a little bit. And you know that when you're a little bit further and you feel quite safe about your idea and you're like, now I really think I've got it, now I need to find somebody to test it with, then you'll come to me because you know this is actually my go-to mindset. But if we're not aligned on which mindsets we bring with us and which mindsets we should be in together, then you're going to try to brainstorm with me and I'm going to shut down every idea that you have. And I'm going to be frustrated because I think, well, you didn't have any good ideas, and you're going to be frustrated because you think, well, this wasn't a brainstorming session. So we all have different natural tendencies, which again is why it's important to give us a framework so we can expand which mindsets we're consciously in. We can also check ourselves a little bit, but again, to give us an opportunity when we collaborate to align on what kind of mindset do we want to be in right now together. Does that address the question?
Yeah. Thank you for explaining. Anybody has any question?
I'll read. I see one or two, and I'll read them if that's all right. Here we go. They're coming in now. First is easy. How to collaborate with your organization. We're doing many innovative projects in the area of renewable energy sources. I'll be sure to share my email and my Onkazit, and we can have a conversation. And then I see we have a couple different ones on mindset. So the first,
I've got
how to integrate
now as well. I managed to get the chat in, Brett. Shall I jump on the mindset questions? I just managed to. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yep. I think so. The question is, different mindsets won't hamper the process. No, because you actually do need different mindsets. So we're here really talking about a process of innovation, collaboration, and then execution. And as you can hear, these are different stages, right? So if we're trying to understand a problem, if we're trying to come up with ideas that are new ways of solving the problem, if we're trying to make decisions, if we're trying to, as I gave the example before, have an idea and really want to test it, right? So you maybe from innovation processes the terms of killing your darlings, right? So take the idea that you've really fallen in love with and then test it to make sure that it really is the right one, right? And then you have to be in a very different mindset than the child's mindset. So you do need different mindsets as part of the process. And again, being aligned on which mindset you need when actually makes the process much, much smoother and tremendously improves communication and collaboration with the team because it helps you align on what it is that you're trying to achieve on any given moment. I think we're all good at a few different mindsets. I think we're all bad or not as good as at some of the mindsets. So I think, yes, we all have a few mindsets at once. I think we're generally not in more than one mindset at the same time, right? And this is again why making them explicit and learning how to switch between different mindsets is really, really important, because it also means as we go through our days, realistically, we work on more than one project. So we may have to be in one mindset for a project between 9 to 11, and then we switch to a completely different project in a different context. And you'll all know that sometimes you really have to make an effort to sort of not because you don't know what the project is about, but because it requires a very different kind of energy and thinking. So to make these kinds of shifts, and again, if we talk about online collaboration, these transitions online can be a lot harsher, right? So we're all in a meeting here now, I think till 12:30, and as soon a few of you will have a call starting at 12:30 about something completely different. And there's no walking from one conference room to another. There's no new people coming into the room, getting a coffee in between. The transitions are much sharper. So again, being practiced and conscious about switching to these different mindsets is something that's really, really crucial.
Do we have any other questions? Anyone want to jump in? Now's the time.
If not, Brett, what we can briefly show just in terms of collaboration, is this something that you want to talk about for a minute?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm happy to explain a little further. So then what do we actually do, right? So we've been talking a bit in terms of our methodology and our approach and sort of the tools that we use. But when it comes down to actually working with our partners, we do a wide range of sort of activities at various different sort of lengths and levels of intensity. First thing would be that historically, the sort of secret sauce to our way of work was bringing people together physically. Of course, we've had to sort of revisit that in the coming months, and we're very happy to be able to now do many of our sort of programs and engagements online. But that being said, typically when we work with our partners, it can be in a very short context. So, one example of this can be doing a hackathon with sort of citizens in a city on air pollution measures and co-creation, and how do we make our city cleaner. And this can take 2 days and be relatively straightforward, to something that's a little more medium term. So what we did with the Development Academy of the Philippines was actually a 6-day in-person session in Berlin, where about 30 of their public servants from the Filipino government from different ministries came to Berlin to do an intensive course on Industry 4.0. Basically, how can they better understand what's happening, what are the sort of future trends, and how can they work with sort of small and medium enterprises or larger ones to help them become more innovative and effective. Additionally, we're doing an engagement with the Government of Canada right now, which is basically helping them to become a more effective and collaborative team within their climate finance department. So basically, they had a new directive from the top, and half of the team was really excited about this, the other half not so much. I imagine you probably have some similar feelings in your respective ministries, but we're working over a couple months to help them become more sort of collaborative, have a shared sense of purpose, and to be more effective and deliver better results for the citizens. And finally, we do very long-term engagements. And when we say long-term, we're talking years. For example, we've been doing a program in Hong Kong to help social service workers be more innovative and develop solutions to make the social care sector more responsive, more effective in Hong Kong, which is a huge sort of issue, as you can imagine, in a city so dense, so many people, and an aging population that lives a very long time. So that's when we say we do sort of short, quick engagements, medium and long term. It's really quite the gamut. So that's a very, very quick overview. I don't know if anyone has any questions on sort of any of the initiatives we've done in the past or our sort of approach. I'd be more than happy to take them. And also, I'm going to put my email in the chat right now if anyone has a question.
Perfect. Maybe if I can, I'll add one point to this. I'll also put up this slide so that those who want to can take down already your email or phone number. There's a word that we use a lot that I think is just worthwhile stressing in this context. We don't talk about our customers or our clients. We talk about our partners. And the reason for that is very simple. What drives us, as I said earlier, is creating a purposeful economy. And while we do short-term engagements and like webinars and short workshops, this transformation is not a short-term project with any partner. And we really believe in the idea of a partnership between us and organizations where we get to know each other, and where, based on our experience and our arsenal, we really then custom build and figure out what are the things that long-term are going to support the transition that our partners are on. And what we really see, and this is the feedback that we get right now, especially in a time like of crisis right now, our partners really turn to us because we know each other intimately, and we're flexible and adaptable to now say, okay, what is it that it's needed right now in this kind of time? Switching to online, looking at new skills, changing the way that transformation needs to happen to drive it forward. I would take one other quick question from the from the Q&A, if that's okay. There's a few more coming up there. I don't know if we'll have a time for all of them, but this goes in a slightly different direction and is asking about the co-creation. So I would just say a word there. There is such things as open innovation, where people just send in lots and lots of ideas from anybody. What we mean with co-creation, and this is really crucial, is for both companies and governments, in order to create successful, sustainable, and innovative solutions, you have to co-create essentially with all your stakeholders. So for companies, that means we help them work together with their customers, but also with their supply chain when they're creating new products and services. And for governments, this means working together with citizens and stakeholder organizations, not just consulting them, but really co-creating together with them, so that the people affected are part of creating the solution. And when we talk about technologies and public discourse, then one of the key things that this, of course, generates is much better solutions, because no one has all the answers nowadays. And B, it generates trust and authenticity in the process. So that's why we think, especially also for governments, it's a really crucial way forward to embrace co-creation as a way to design and implement solutions together with the community. I'm just trying to pick other. Brett, feel free, or Mayank, if you want to start.
Sorry for cutting.
I have a quick one.
So there are very important questions that I have been getting. Maybe you're not able to see them. One of it is that, how do you think the digital transformation process shall be implemented without aligning between mindsets as well as assessment of organization culture or subcultures between the different departments? Like how to align mindsets with the culture of the organization between the different departments.
I see. So I think maybe this question came in the chat. So is that possible? Because I think we have now some questions in the Q&A and some in the chat.
Yeah.
So if I get the question right, it's about what role does digital transformation play in the mindset and collaboration process? Is that right?
Different mindsets, alignment with the culture of the organization. And that there are different departments in the organization. So each department will be having a different mindset people, and the culture would be different. The way of functioning would be different. So how to align the mindset?
Yeah. So I think, especially when it comes to communication within teams, even more in between teams, wherever, to put it very bluntly, wherever there have been weaknesses in the communication culture in the organization previously, digital transformation, I think, has the potential to exacerbate them, so to make them more visible and have them create more negative effects. because again, communication is more targeted. There's less space for sort of implicit communication, for coincidental chats. So I really believe that in order to align with that, in a time of increased digital and remote collaboration, you have to make them explicit. You have to define them with your team and in between different teams. And where there are differences, you have to negotiate them. And but that starts with making them really, really explicit. That's also why we speak of a mindset inventory. So for us, the starting point is bringing in our own set of mindsets, but then working with a team, with an organization, to see which of those fit and where they need to define their own mindsets, even within and between different teams, and then make that part of the explicit conversation in order to align. So you have to give the thing a name, first of all, so that you can talk about it and you can find out, do we mean the same thing when we say the same thing? And then only can you start a process of alignment. But again, the more you co-create and collaborate digitally, the more important it becomes to do that, because any inefficiencies that sort of direct personal communication may have still smoothed over will become more drastic during times of remote collaboration.
Okay. Just a quick question. I think this is directed to the last slide. Can you explain about the long-term engagements that you mentioned in the last one?
Yeah, I think I can take that one, Reuven. And then there's another question I'll answer while I'm at it in terms of sort of in-person versus online. So as I sort of mentioned in talking about our long-term programs, these last for a very long time. And as Reuven said, we talk about partnerships. And for example, one of our partners is H&M, and we've been working with them for years. And actually, what we've been working on has changed over the years. So we've done youth programs with them, we've done peer innovation programs with them, we've done challenges with them, et cetera. So when we say long-term, it can almost change. But additionally, it says, sort of fellowship programs, and I see that someone asked that. If we go back up, we don't have to, but on the slide of whom we work with, you saw 2 young entrepreneurs, and they're part of our fellowship program. So we'll take a group of, let's say, 20 environmental entrepreneurs. This is a program we did with the United Nations Environmental Program, and we helped them over multiple years. They had great ideas on sort of ventures they wanted to create, and we helped them actually create them, so prototype them, first ideate, prototype, scale, bring it to market. So of course, this takes a very long time, and that's sort of what, for example, an online a long-term engagement can entail. And Desh, for example, has a really interesting venture. He's based just outside of Delhi. He's created an online platform based in AI that connects people to opportunities. So if you're interested in sort of climate change, his platform, and you type this in and say where you're from, it'll list jobs, it'll list conferences, it'll list groups, networking opportunities, et cetera. And Swarnima is actually also based in Delhi, and she founded India's first female reproductive health conference, as well as her company, Thea Care, that helps sort of destigmatize female healthcare topics. So those are sort of our fellows. And then finally, I think it's a very interesting question or comment that came in. So what is the role of digital transformation in academics, coupled with the comment of, in person will always be supreme. So as I mentioned, we believe being in person, there's nothing better. You can't recreate that. But we have learned since COVID that there's no denying that there will be more and more sort of online and digital collaboration and learning. Then the thing is, you can do this well, or you can do it very poorly. So I think we've all been in sort of online calls that have, weren't moderated well. They didn't have a clear sort of, roadmap. People, there was a bunch of background noise, all of these things. But we've learned you can do this very well, and Reuven touched on many of these points already. So we're, bullish, if you will, in terms of using a market term on the ability to learn online. And
maybe I can,
go ahead, Ruben.
Sorry, Brett. Yeah, maybe just to very briefly put one addition to what Brett says in there. We have a long history actually, and I would personally put my strongest belief in there in what we call blended learning, right? So there are moments that are very hard, not impossible, but very hard to recreate digitally. But there are many places where online collaboration really works tremendously well. So we have one program, for instance, our Leadership Academy, that we've provided both to public sector organizations and to companies like H&M, for instance, like Unilever, that has always brought together global talent and young leaders from their organizations. So people sort of like in their late 30s to mid 40s and 40s that are sort of like moving up to executive positions. And it's brought them together in a program because they've been all around the globe that had, let's say, for instance, over 6 months, 3 workshops that were in person, but then a consistent online collaboration, online learning engagement in between those workshops, right? So you had the in-person element and the online element, and you use both to their maximum advantage. And I would expect over the medium term that will return a little bit more to this kind of blended approach that we've been sort of like championing for quite a while, because it's more environmentally sustainable. It makes more effective use of the time of people who are very busy. But as Brett says, we've learned over the past that actually, if you embrace the medium, if you get the awkward out of online, you can actually do a lot online very well as well. Sorry, Brett, I just wanted to add that briefly.
No problem. I think we're wrapping up, so I don't know, Mayank, did you have any sort of closing words? I would say once again, we're very grateful.
Brett, just a quick question. This is regarding our organization. Like, we are a bureaucratic setup. So what are the challenges that a bureaucratic setup has for digital collaboration? Based on your experience.
I would say if we go back to sort of the 4 sorry, to this one here, I think there's often as institutions with long history and also very legitimate, even more than many private companies, the need for sort of transparency and clarity and a really clear rule book because of the trust that you have to sort of like embody as public institutions. The must is often very difficult. There's often a very long and complicated rule book, and changes to that rule book are not easy, right? So I think this is one of the things that makes digital transformation sometimes hard, but in my experience, at least, something that private companies sometimes struggle with is, in my view, often very clear in public sector organizations, namely the want. So the intrinsic motivation, the reason that people work in public service and why they do what they do and why they will go the extra mile and why they care about what they do is often incredibly clear to them. So that means I think the big opportunity is always in looking at the can. So how can we empower people who are already very motivated, and where can we, in a softer way than changing the rule book right away, but in terms of from a leadership perspective, from a culture perspective, recognize where people try and embrace new ways of working. So I think those are the 2 bits to really leverage, is the can and the should, knowing that the intrinsic motivation is very strong, and also knowing that, I would say often for quite good reasons, the processes, the procedures, the rules are relatively strict and fixed and don't change quickly or easily. This at least would be my view.
Yeah, thank you, Ruben, for summing it up. I think that's a wrap for this webinar. I would like to, I would request my DG sir to share his thoughts on the webinar, the subject. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Brett. Thank you, Mr. Boss. It was really a very, very good presentation. And I think many of your works which you are going to teach us has been self-learned by these people during the lockdown. I think after a long, long time, rather, I think only this generation could see such kind of, lockdown which had given them back the nature which they have never seen in their lifetime. I think I am one of the lucky one. When I remember when I was child, I used to take bath in river Ganges in Bihar. But now I have been told that during this last 40 days, it has gained much of its lost. Do school people are doing, and I hope that it's sunk in our mindset that we have to be sustainable or we will perish. I think with this line, I think I thank you all, and I thank each and every participant for listening to us, and I hope that you will, and we all will come up to the expectation of what our friends have tried to teach us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, Reuben and Brett, for this wonderful webinar to a very relevant and important topic that, that is nowadays the need of the hour. We have to change, otherwise will, as the sir said, will perish. So thanks again, and we'll stay in touch.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
Thanks.
thank you all once again for the opportunity. We're very grateful and had a great discussion and hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye and have a lovely evening.